Weeks into his second year as president and facing low approval ratings and political headwinds on everything from COVID to inflation, President Biden sat down with NBC News for an exclusive wide-ranging interview today. The president making news on several counts, revealing how many are left on his short list of potential Supreme Court nominees. The president also reacting to today's dismal inflation numbers, climbing 7.5% since last year, now at a 40-year high. But the president refusing to criticize Democratic governors who have been moving ahead of the CDC by announcing on their own rollbacks of indoor mask wearing requirements. The president also talking Ukraine and slamming a critical military account of the chaotic U.S. exit from Afghanistan. Our roughly 22-minute interview took place in Culpeper, Virginia, where he was promoting his Build Back Better bill. Mr. President, in recent days, we've seen numerous governors from blue states roll back indoor mask requirements, essentially getting ahead of the federal government, the CDC. Are those governors wrong?
Well, it's hard to say whether they're wrong. Here's the science is saying now that masks work, masks make a difference, and there's a relationship. I think there's only one governor drawing back immediately, and most of them are somewhere in February. I mean, the end of February, March, April. They're set a time limit, and I assume it has something to do with whether the Omicron variant continues to dive. There are fewer and fewer cases, and because there is a relationship between the number of cases you have in your community and the need for wear masks.
Do you acknowledge, though, a restlessness and leaders bowing to the political winds?
Oh, I do. Omicron and the variant, all the variants have had a profound impact on the psyche of the American people.
Should children be required to wear masks in schools?
Well, look, when I got in office, only 46% of the schools were open. Now 98% of them are open, and they're wearing masks. What's happening is every day that goes by, children are more protected. We're now on the verge of being able to have shots for children under the age of 7 and young children. And so the more protection they have, probably you're going to see less and less requirement to have the masks.
But the CDC hasn't changed its guidance on that. And the question is, with these governors making these moves, does it begin to make the government, the CDC, irrelevant, that people will gravitate toward, the advice that really fits their worldview, that this thing feels like it's over?
Well, look, I think it's one thing to talk about masks other than to talk about shots and boosters and the like. But it's, look, it is confusing. It's worrisome to people. They're trying to figure out. But what I've tried to do, I've tried to make sure we have all the vaccines needed, all the boosters needed, all the masks are needed, all the protection that's needed.
Are you afraid, though, that some states and cities are moving too quickly to loosen indoor mask mandates?
Well, it's I committed that I would follow the science as put forward by the CDC and the federal people. And I think it's probably premature, but it's a tough call.
And I asked about the tense standoff with Russia over Ukraine.
What are your plans toward American citizens who are in Ukraine and might be there during an invasion? What scenarios would you put American troops to rescue and get Americans out?
There's not. That's a world war. When Americans and Russians start shooting at one another, we're in a very different world than we've ever been in.
Not even on behalf of simply evacuating Americans?
No. How do you do that? How do you even find them? This is not like, I'm hoping that if, in fact, he's foolish enough to go in, he's smart enough not to, in fact, do anything that would negatively impact on American citizens.
Have you told him that?
Yes.
You've told him that Americans will be a line that they can't cross?
Well, I didn't have to tell him that. I've spoken about that. He knows that. And, it's a little bit, look, that's what I've asked is American citizens should leave now. We're dealing with one of the largest armies in the world. This is a very different situation, and things could go crazy quickly.
On the subject of American citizens, I have to draw your attention to that Army report, an investigative report that's come out about the lead up to the withdrawal from Afghanistan. It interviewed many military officials and officers who said the administration ignored the handwriting on the wall. Another described trying to get folks in the embassy ready to evacuate, encountering people who are essentially in denial of this situation. Does any of that ring true to you?
No. No. That's not what I was told.
That you were told that the U.S. administration officials were prepared, they knew it was time to get out?
No, what I was told, no one told me that, look, there was no good time to get out. But if we had not gotten out, they acknowledged that we would have had to put a hell of a lot more troops back in. It wasn't just 2,000, 4,000. We would have to significantly increase the number of troops, and we were back in this war of attrition. And there was no way we were ever going to unite Ukraine. I mean, excuse me, Iraq, Afghanistan. No way that was going to happen. And so this is a much wiser thing to do.
I just want to clarify, are you rejecting the conclusions or the accounts that are in this Army report?
Yes, I am.
So they're not true?
I'm rejecting them.
Then there was today's sour headline on the economy. Inflation skyrocketing to 7.5%, a 40-year high. Prices still spiking on everything from used cars to gas to food. Inflation now costing the average American an extra $275 a month compared to last year.
I think it was back in July you said inflation was going to be temporary. I think a lot of Americans are wondering what your definition of temporary is.
Well, you're being a wise guy with me a little bit, and I understand that's your job. But look, at the time, what happened was let's look at the reason for the inflation. The reason for the inflation is the supply chains were cut off, meaning that the products, for example, automobiles, the lack of computer chips to be able to build those automobiles so they could function, they need those computer chips. They were not available. So what happens? The number of cars were reduced, the new cars were reduced. It made up at one point 1/3 the cost of inflation because the price of automobiles were up. So what I did when I went out and made sure we started to make those domestically, we got Intel to come in and provide $20 billion to build a new facility. A number of organizations are doing the same kinds of things.
When can Americans expect some relief from this soaring inflation?
According to Nobel laureates, 14 of them that contacted me and a number of corporate leaders, it ought to be able to start to taper off as we go through this year. In the meantime, I'm going to do everything in my power to deal with the big points that are impacting most people in their homes.
Can I ask you where you stand right now in your nomination process for Supreme Court? What your short list looks like, or if you want to name the nominee right here, we'd be happy to hear you.
Well, first of all, the short list are nominees who are incredibly well qualified and documented.
What's the number you're at? 4, 5, 6?
Well, what I've done is I've taken about 4 people and done the deep dive on them, meaning this thorough background checks, and to see if there's anything in the background that would make them not qualified.
Is it important that you believe they'll get a vote from the Republican side?
Well, I think whomever I pick will get a vote from the Republican side for the following reason. I'm not looking to make an ideological choice here. I'm looking for someone to replace Judge Breyer with the same kind of capacity Judge Breyer had, with an open mind, who understands the Constitution, interprets it in a way that is consistent with the mainstream interpretation of the Constitution.
Much more of my interview with the president tomorrow morning on Today and in coverage ahead of the Super Bowl this Sunday here on NBC. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.